turn that thing off or I'll shoot." Lynette's voice cracked through the chaos like a thunderclap, shrill and commanding. Her silver pistol glinted under the midday sun as she leveled it toward the rescue helicopter. Descending into my backyard, I was waving a bright yellow towel, trying to signal the crew. A woman was having a heart attack. Every second counted. But Lynette didn't care about that. "This is a violation of HOA airspace regulation for 7B. She screamed. And in that single insane moment, everything, my safety, the neighborhood, the life I thought I was quietly rebuilding, after loss, disintegrated into something much darker. The pilot didn't flinch. He just adjusted his altitude, his calm eyes scanning her posture, her weapon, her intent. He wasn't just flying a rescue mission. He was FBI. And when that bullet left her pistol, missing the chopper by inches, it didn't just hit air. It hit a federal hornet's nest. That moment would spiral into 6 indictments, millions frozen, and a scandal plastered across CNN. But back then, I was just Wyatt Greaves, a 35-year-old freelance software engineer who'd inherited his grandmother's old house in Pinewood Valley after spending 6 agonizing months watching her die from cancer. I wasn't brave. I wasn't a whistleblower. I was just trying to figure out how to live again and understand why her house still smelled like lavender soap and secrets. The horror. I thought they were just annoying. That Tuesday morning had started like any other. The floorboards still creaked like Grandma's ghost was pacing upstairs. Her coffee mug sat exactly where she left it, on the windowsill, collecting dust and memories. I was lonely, raw, and barely hanging on. And then she screamed. Mrs. Donatella Rossetti, my neighbor, 78, stubborn as gravel, and halfway up, an old ladder to help me trim the apple tree, collapsed in my yard. My heart, she gasped, her wrinkled hand pressed against her chest, the gardening shears slipping from her fingers. I didn't think, I just moved. Called 911. When they said the ambulance would be 25 minutes, I begged them for a medical chopper. They hesitated. I insisted. 12 minutes later, the rhythmic thrum of blades swept over the neighborhood. It was coming in fast. I grabbed the towel, ran out barefoot, and waved it in wide arcs across the lawn. That's when I heard it. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She stormed across the grass like a judge delivering a sentence. Lynette Coburn, HOA president, 52, designer blazer, pearls, and a stare that could sandpaper steel. "I'm helping someone who's dying," I shouted over the roar. "You are violating HOA regulation for 7B, she shrieked. "No unauthorized aircraft in designated residential airspace." My brain stuttered. I'd never heard of any such rule. But Lynette didn't wait for logic. She marched into the middle of the yard, directly into the flight path, and then she reached into her handbag. That silver pistol, raised, aimed. "If that aircraft doesn't leave HOA property immediately, I will consider it a threat to community safety." The pilot, midair, hovering, stopped being just a medical responder. His jaw set. He spoke into his headset with urgency I could feel in my bones. "Armed civilian on site. Immediate risk. Need backup." He didn't land. He touched down in the street, 200 yards away. Donatella lost 8 more minutes. But she lived, barely. I ran beside the medics, holding her hand, whispering she was going to be okay. Well behind me, Lynette stood with her arms crossed like she'd just averted a terrorist attack. "You'll receive a $2,500 fine for emergency response interference," she said coldly. There was something surreal about watching a woman nearly die and being punished for saving her. The chopper lifted off, but the pilot, Marcus Cross, wasn't packing up like other medics might. He was writing, photographing Lynette's license plate, and when our eyes met, he crossed the lawn, slipped me his card. "I'll be filing a report," he said quietly. "Not about the landing, about the interference. Someone will be in touch." His tone wasn't just professional. It was deliberate. Lynette was already at my side again with a clipboard. "Sign here. Emergency response interference. Unauthorized airspace use. Failure to obtain emergency service approval. Total $4,000. It was official looking, maybe even real. But it felt like extortion. I told her I'd speak to a lawyer. And in her eyes, something shifted. It wasn't just irritation. It was rage. My grandmother's dying words echoed suddenly, vividly. Be careful of that Coburn woman. Now I understood. When the helicopter disappeared into the horizon, I stood alone in the backyard, the yellow towel still clenched in my fist, Donatella's blood on my hands, and a question pounding through my head like the rotors still thundered. Above me, what the hell kind of neighborhood had I just inherited? Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynette's face twisted with righteous fury. I heard the mechanical thump of helicopter blades. Felt the weight of that $4,000 violation notice sitting on my kitchen table like a lit fuse. It didn't matter that Donatella was alive. Something irreversible had been set in motion. I sat at the kitchen table until 3:00 a.m., staring at the stack of dusty boxes my grandmother had left behind. All those years she warned me about the horror, her cryptic mutterings, the way she locked the basement, the strange glances at neighbors during porch conversations. Back then, I chalked it up to old age and paranoia. Now, I knew better. If Rule 47B really existed, the one about airspace and aircraft bans, it had to be written down somewhere. There had to be records, right? So I opened the first box. Then another, and another. I combed through bylaws, budgets, HOA newsletters, and annual meeting minutes dating back to 1999. Nothing. No mention of airspace restrictions, no Rule 47B, nothing, even remotely related to helicopters, drones, or emergency protocols. It was fiction, pure fiction. And Lynette had pointed a loaded weapon at a helicopter pilot to enforce it. I was about to give up when I remembered something strange my grandmother had once said. The real rules aren't in the book. They're in the basement. The basement door had always been locked. I'd never bothered with it. I assumed it was filled with old Christmas decorations and boxes of forgotten photos. But now I wasn't so sure. Her jewelry box upstairs held a ring of mismatched keys. And on the third try, the basement lock clicked open with a groan. The smell hit me first. Old cedar, peeper, and that faint electric warmth of outdated machinery still running. It wasn't a basement. It was an archive. Rows of labeled folders, metal filing cabinets, and one aging desktop computer that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Obama administration. And in the far corner, a small black safe with a blinking digital keypad. I stood there for a long moment, overwhelmed by the weight of the past. She hadn't just lived here. She'd been watching, documenting, hiding something. Booting up the old computer felt like uncovering a ghost. Folders labeled by year, spreadsheets, PDF scans, even audio recordings. I clicked through aimlessly at first, until I opened the folder marked 2010. That's when everything changed. Emails, dozens of them, all between my grandmother and the whore board. Her resignation letter was calm, polite, but unmistakably damning. I can no longer, in good conscience, serve in any financial capacity given the discrepancies I've uncovered in recent accounting. I will retain copies of all documentation from my personal records. And Lynette's response, Mrs. Greaves' concerns are based on her misunderstanding of standard accounting practices. Her resignation is accepted, effective immediately. We trust she will respect the confidentiality of HOA financial materials. Translation: sit down, shut up, or else. My grandmother hadn't quit because of a disagreement. She'd quit because she found something she wasn't supposed to find. And instead of staying silent, she saved everything. 15 years of horror financial records, not the ones handed out at meetings, the real ones. Hidden audits, transfer logs, duplicate invoices. And emails. Hundreds of emails. Lynette had submitted a request to the FAA in 2018, asking for restricted airspace designation over Pinewood Valley. They denied her in writing. Private HOA letters, they said, didn't have legal authority. to restrict aircraft access without federal jurisdiction. The letter was clear, final, firm. But 6 months later, Rule 47B magically appeared in the HOA's unofficial handbook, which Lynette enforced like it was federal law. My stomach turned. She wasn't just drunk on power, she had created an imaginary law, then pointed a gun at a helicopter to enforce it. That's not overreach. That's delusion. I turned toward the safe. The digital lock blinked patiently. I tried every date I could think of. Her birthday, Grandpa's birthday, their anniversary. Nothing. Then my email dinged. I hadn't used her old Gmail account since the funeral. But there it was, a scheduled message. Subject, for Wyatt, when you're ready. The body of the message was simple. If you're reading this, you found the basement. The combination is not a family date. It's something they never knew. Look for the truth they tried to bury. Her tone was steady, warm, like she was still watching me, still fighting beside me. I returned to the computer and opened the accounting folder again. And there, scribbled in the margin of a scanned bank statement, were 5 numbers, a date with a small note beside it. November 15th, 2010. The day I walked away, I entered it into the safe. The beep of the lock disengaging echoed through the basement like a gunshot. Inside, an external hard drive labeled insurance policy, a folder of shell company documents, a map of Pinewood Valley, color-coded with ominous little pins, and a handwritten note. They think they buried the truth. They were wrong. Everything they need to convict her is right here. Love. Grandma. I didn't realize I was crying until my vision blurred. She hadn't just left me the house. She left me a war she couldn't finish. Upstairs, I plugged in the hard drive and opened the first file. 15 years of embezzlement. Over $3 million in park improvement fees for a park that never existed. Dozens of elderly residents charged with fake violations. Young families fined into foreclosure. Child safety inspections that were really just shake-downs. It was a racket. A sophisticated, deliberate protection scheme disguised as community management. And then my phone buzzed. The neighborhood app, Nextdoor, had exploded. Lynette had posted a full-length rant. Emergency. Safety concern. New resident endangers community. She accused me of recklessly summoning aircraft, endangering children, and creating a dangerous precedent. She was rewriting reality, again. The post had 47 comments. Some neighbors were furious, some were confused, some weren't buying it anymore. But I wasn't ready for what came next. Tapping on the basement window, I turned and saw a shadow. A man, holding a camera, taking pictures. I bolted upstairs and out the front door. But he was gone. Only muddy footprints in the flower bed remained. Someone knew I had the safe. Someone was watching. I barely slept. By morning, I had a theory. The safe combination had to be tied to her resignation. It was the only date she ever mentioned in that context. So why that date? I searched her treasure files again and found the note that confirmed it. The day I discovered the truth. That was the day she'd caught Lynette red-handed. The pieces clicked into place like clockwork. By noon, I had another visitor. Donatella Rossetti, standing on my porch with a basket of bread and eyes sharp as razors. I think we need to talk about what you've gotten yourself into, she said. She sat down in my grandmother's favorite chair like she'd done it 100 times. Your grandmother and I weren't just neighbors, she said softly. We were the only two people in this neighborhood who ever challenged Lynette. I sat in stunned silence. I was a tax accountant for 30 years. She went on, your grandmother was treasurer. We both knew when numbers didn't add up. Donatella reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. She gave me a copy, just in case. We plugged it into my laptop, and the world changed again. Blockchain records, untouchable, timestamp ledgers, proof of every theft. Your grandmother wasn't just documenting it, she was fighting it. Quietly, cleverly, she was redirecting stolen money back into the community through anonymous donations. Tuition, utility bills, cancer treatments. She turned Lynette's greed into a lifeline for the people Lynette tried to destroy. Donatella looked me in the eyes. Your grandmother spent 14 years gathering proof. But she always said she wouldn't live to finish the job. I realized I wasn't holding a story anymore. I was holding a torch dot, and it was my turn to carry it forward. It was early evening when I got the call. And no number, professional tone. Just 6 words, Mr. Greaves, are you free tonight? The man identified himself as Marcus Cross, not a pilot, not anymore. Special Agent Marcus Cross, FBI, and suddenly, everything my grandmother had feared, everything she had prepared for, snapped into terrifying focus. I think it's time we talk about Mrs. Coburn and the organization she's protecting, he said. We agreed to meet at a roadside diner 20 minutes outside Pinewood Valley. Neutral ground, no HOAs, no surveillance. Or so I thought. When I arrived, Marcus was already sitting in the back booth, nursing a coffee and scanning the parking lot like a soldier between wars. He didn't smile. Before I tell you anything, he said, you need to know something. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside, surveillance photos, wire transfers, fake invoices, shell company registrations. Your grandmother was one of our informants, he said. She came to us in March. I stare at him, speechless. She had reason to believe her horror was being used to launder money, not just in Pinewood Valley, but across 3 states. That sentence alone would have shattered me. But he wasn't done. She gave us documentation of fake improvement projects, funny fines, and ghost companies funneling payments through resident accounts. At first, we thought it was small-time corruption. He leaned in. It's not. It's organized crime, cartel-connected. My breath caught. This entire operation, what Lynette's bill over the past decade, is a cover for laundering money from drug trafficking through HOA assessments, emergency fees, and fake construction projects. Your grandmother proved it. And then he said it. But we think someone killed her before she could turn over the rest. I felt cold all over. No, I whispered. She had cancer. She did. He nodded. But her medical file showed sudden complications that aren't consistent with her prior condition. It's possible someone hastened the process. We can't confirm it yet. But let's just say we've seen this before. The pain hit me all over again. But this time, it came with rage. Marcus laid it out in detail. Lynette had been on the FBI's radar for months. They knew she was funneling HOA funds into fake improvement projects and disappearing the money through a chain of LLCs connected to construction firms that didn't exist. But the tip that started everything, my grandmother, she called us with one request. Marcus said, if anything happens to me, find my grandson, he'll finish it. And here I was, holding a file folder full of crimes that spanned 3 states and totaled more than $17 million. Why haven't you arrested her already? I asked. Marcus's expression hardened. Because we don't want just Lynette. We want the whole network. She's a mid-level player, not the mastermind. We need her to panic, to reach out to her superiors, to make mistakes. That's where I came in. We need her to believe you're just a nosy neighbor who doesn't know what he's doing, but dangerous enough to threaten her power. You want me to bait her? I said flatly. Yes, he replied, because she's already watching you, and she's about to get desperate. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My thoughts were spiraling. My grandmother had raised me after my parents died. She'd taught me math and chess, and how to boil tea leaves when we couldn't afford proper medicine. She'd been gentle, kind, and always quietly angry about injustice. Now I knew why. She built a blockchain archive, I said quietly, encrypted ledgers of every transaction. It's all in my house. Marcus's eyes lit up. She anticipated every move. He said, your grandmother didn't just collect evidence. She built an airtight case. We've already verified part of it. He paused, then opened another folder. Wyatt. We think the ladder Donatella fell from was tampered with. Bolts loosened. Till Marks. It wasn't an accident. My stomach dropped. She'd been asking about the park funds, Marcus said. They were sending her a message. The woman who'd baked me bread, who'd almost died in my backyard, had been targeted. I need to take this to the police, I started. He shook his head. The local PD is compromised. Lynette's network includes bribed officials and corrupted housing authorities. This has to stay federal. He slid a burner phone across the table. Use this for all contact going forward. We'll have agents nearby. But be careful. Just as I reached for the phone, my own device buzzed violently in my pocket. An extra alert. Emergency HOA meeting. Tonight at 7 p.m. Photo attached. Me and Marcus sitting in that exact diner, taken through a window. Caption: unknown men conducting surveillance of our community. Who are they? Residents deserve answers. She already knew. Marcus stared at it, then smiled darkly. She's reacting. Perfect. This is the kind of desperation that leads to mistakes. He walked me to my car. Wyatt, from now on, everything you do matters. Everything she does to stop you is evidence. And then he was gone. I barely made it home before another Nextdoor post went live. This one was worse. Notice of HOA violations. Wyatt grieves. Unauthorized landscaping modifications. Failure to obtain architectural approval. Improper garbage bin placement. Exterior noise pollution. Emergency aircraft deployment without authorizations of in total charges. $34,000 in fines. And a warning that foreclosure proceedings would begin in 30 days. 30 days? They were coming for my house. But what they didn't know, I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, I sat in the middle of my grandmother's study, surrounded by binders, printouts, and USB drives. Her handwriting was everywhere. Notes, reminders, warnings. In the safe was a second hard drive I hadn't noticed before. Smaller, labeled Quiet Fire. Inside, a list of names. HOA board members across multiple states. The same shell. Companies. The same invoice duplications. Same missing playgrounds, recreation centers, and community pools. 73 communities. Same scam. Same blueprint. Same betrayal. She hadn't just documented Lynette's crimes. She'd mapped the entire conspiracy. That's when I knew I was no longer part of a story. I was the story. At 6:57 p.m. I walked into the horror emergency meeting. Every chair was full. Neighbors who never spoke waved nervously. A few looked away. A few looked scared. And then I saw Lynette, standing at the front with a microphone and a slideshow. She clicked to the next image. Me and Marcus at the diner. We are under attack, she said to the crowd. By outsiders, by agitators, betrayers to our community. Her voice cracked with fury. She clicked again. This time, a blurry photo of me in my own backyard. We have photographic evidence of surveillance, unauthorized meetings, and contact with unknown operatives. She turned toward me. This individual is in violation of multiple HOA protocols and is currently under investigation for actions that endanger the safety of our children. Silence. Then something happened. Mrs. Patterson -72, quiet, harmless, stood up. I'd like to know where the $3,000 I paid for a playground went, she said. Then Mr. Peterson stood. Yeah. And my daughter's been waiting 2 years for that rec center. A young mom with twins Rosenecks. I paid for $1,000 to $100 in improvement fees. Where is that money? Within minutes, a third of the room was standing. Lynette's voice trembled. These people have been misled by lies and conspiracy. But she was drowning. And that's when Donatella walked in. She moved slowly but with power, carrying a plastic bag. 2 days ago, someone tampered with my ladder, she said. And they thought I wouldn't notice. She held up the damaged bolts, scraped, twisted. I may be 78, but I'm not senile. Someone wanted me dead. And it wasn't a stranger. Chaos erupted. Shouts, accusations, demands for answers. People on their phones, pulling up bank statements and HOA newsletters. Lynette backed toward the wall, visibly shaking. I didn't have to say a word. The truth was already louder than anything I could yell. And as I stepped outside into the cool night, heart pounding, I saw it. All 4 of my tires, slashed, and note tucked under the windshield. Last warning. Some accidents aren't survivable. But instead of fear, I felt something else, resolve. My grandmother had once said, justice moves slow, but it never forgets, and neither did I. The slash marks weren't settled. Each tire on my car had been gutted with precision. A message left in rubber and steel. The note tucked under my wiper was written in a shaky, all-caps scrawl, last warning. Some accidents aren't survivable. I didn't panic. Not anymore. I dialed Marcus without hesitation. Within 20 minutes, two unmarked SUVs pulled into the parking lot of the community center. Lights off, agents already moving. Forensics teams combed the asphalt. One agent collected the note with gloved hands. Another photographed the tire tracks. The escalation had finally crossed into open violence. But what happened next changed everything. Lynette arrived. She pulled up in her sleek black Lexus. Brad Vossler riding shotgun and three men I'd never seen before climbing out of the back, all wearing bright yellow vests labeled HOA Security Patrol in bold black letters. They weren't police, but they moved like they thought they were. Lynette marched toward the agents with a battery-powered megaphone. "You're all trespassing on private HOA property," she declared, voice echoing off the walls. "This is a citizen's arrest for vandalism, conspiracy, and endangerment of community safety protocols." Brad clutched a clipboard like it was a badge. His hands trembled. The three men fanned out to block the parking lot exits. They were trying to trap the FBI. It was insanity. But Lynette was long past sanity now. Marcus stepped forward, credentials visible around his neck. "Calm, controlled, Mum," he said evenly. "This is a federal investigation. Step back. I don't care what fake badges you're waving," she screamed through the megaphone. "This is HOA jurisdiction, and I have full authority to detain trespassers under Emergency Charter 12A. That's when she did it. She reached into her oversized handbag, pulled out the same silver pistol she'd pointed at the rescue helicopter just days earlier. Only this time, she pointed it directly at Marcus. Everything stopped. The casual calm disappeared from Marcus's face. He straightened, drew his weapon, and barked the words that cracked the night in two. "FBI. Drop the weapon, now." In an instant, the parking lot exploded with motion. 6 black SUVs spiraled in from side streets, silent but fast. Tactical agents pour out in full gear. Lasers danced across Lynette's chest, red dots punctuating her authority fantasy with cold reality. The 3 yellow-vested men froze mid-step. Brad dropped the clipboard. Lynette just stood there, pistol shaking in her hand, the illusion of control cracking behind her eyes. "You can't arrest me," she screamed, voice rising into hysteria. "I'm the elected president of this community." Marcus didn't flinch. "You're pointing a loaded firearm at a federal agent. You're about 10 seconds away from being a headline." The gun wavered. For a moment, I thought she might actually pull the trigger. But then Brad moved. He lunged forward and slapped the weapon from her hands, sending it skidding across the pavement. "Enough," he yelled, voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore." Agents surged in. Brad dropped to his knees, hands raised, sobbing. "I've been feeding information to the FBI for 8 months, he cried. "She threatened my wife, my kids. She made me forge documents, lied to everyone. But when she tried to kill Mrs. Rossetti, I knew I had to stop her." Lynette didn't resist. She collapsed under the weight of her own delusion. Cuffed and silent, eyes wide as the prison cell already closing round her. In the trunk of her car, they found $340,000 in bundled cash, 15 burner phones, a hard drive containing the most advanced money laundering software the Bureau had ever seen, and a detailed map of 73 HOA communities, with color-coded pins, laundering potential, local law enforcement loyalty, and elimination priority levels. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was an empire. And she'd been its queen. Until tonight. As the agents loaded her into the SUV, Lynette began shouting about her rights. "Unauthorized parking in HOA zones. You're all in violation. I'll file complaints." But her voice cracked with each word, drifting into pitiful background noise. Marcus approached me quietly. "This is far from over," he said. 17 million is still unaccounted for. No, she didn't move it. Someone else did. I nodded slowly. "My grandmother," I whispered. "I think I know where it went." The next morning, the news trucks arrived. FBI agents swarmed Pinewood Valley, collecting files from homes, serving warrants. Helicopters circled. Reporters shouted questions. The story was national by noon. FBI breaks HOA crime ring -3 state. Embezzlement and laundering network exposed. But even as the headlines exploded, Marcus pulled me aside. "We've traced some of the missing funds," he said. "They were routed into offshore accounts under anonymous trust foundations." Then he showed me the LOGIS. Charitable giving, medical assistance, college scholarships, mortgage relief. All anonymous, all targeted at Pinewood Valley families, and all matching donation amounts to exact theft totals from Lynette's records. It wasn't money laundering. It was redemption. My grandmother hadn't just documented the crime. She rerouted the stolen money to rebuild the community from the shadows. Every dollar Lynette stole, she gave back. "Your grandmother was brilliant," Marcus said, showing me a ledger that matched donations down to the cent. "She used Lynette's network against her. She hijacked their system. She turned fraud into funding. Every family that got mysterious help with bills, tuition, or medical debt. That was her. Love never dies. That was the password the FBI found in her encrypted vault. The year Grandpa died, the year she began her quiet war, she hadn't just planned for justice, she'd built it into the walls of this community." While Lynette screamed about her HOA authority, my grandmother was funding playgrounds, prescriptions, and futures, one anonymous transfer at a time. That night, I walked through Pinewood Valley with new eyes. Donatella joined me by the memory garden we'd started building near the fake park site. Except now, it wasn't fake. Residents had come together, pulled up weeds, repaired benches, hung swings from trees, laughed again, lived again. "You did it," I said. But Donatella shook her head. "She did it. You just lit the match she left behind." Children played in the distance, neighbors hugged, and for the first time since I'd inherited this house, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like a steward. Later that week, I was voted HOA president unanimously. Not because I wanted the title, but because people finally understood what leadership could mean when it wasn't poisoned by control. We implemented blocking voting, public budgets, rotating board seats, real transparency, real trust. And then the final piece fell into place. The $17 million. It was traced, penny by penny, back to 73 neighborhoods across 3 states. Every resident who had been robbed, fined, threatened, or cheated by fake fees got their money back. Some cried, some laughed, some simply stared at the check in disbelief, remembering years of silence they thought no one had ever noticed. But someone had, and that someone had made sure justice came. Even after she was gone, Lynette Coburn, convicted on 23 federal counts: racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, attempted murder. 20-5 years. No parole. No more threats. No more microphones. She tried to run in horror in prison. It did not go well. Her complaints to the warden about cell decor standards and improper commissary scheduling went viral. Again. Queen of airspace. Inmate #for commerce 791. Her legacy was a meme. My grandmother's was a movement. On the 6-month anniversary of Lynette's arrest, Marcus flew over Pinewood Valley during a routine patrol. I looked up from watering the garden. He waved. I waved back. No one pointed a gun this time. Donatella sat nearby with a basket of tomatoes. She smiled at me, then gestured to the playground, the garden, the rebuilt community around us. She'd be proud, she said. She planted justice, and you helped it grow. They say when a building collapses, the last thing you hear isn't the cracking of beams or the shattering of glass. It's silence. The kind of silence that only happens after something enormous breaks. and the world, stunned, tries to figure out what happens next. That was Pinewood Valley in the days after Lynette Coburn's arrest. Not chaos, not celebration, just a stunned, breathless pause. And then, movement. It started with a phone call from a woman I didn't know. She lived 3 states away, in a place called Summer Ridge Townhomes. I think, she said softly, the same thing happened here. Her voice trembled as she described a decade of mysterious improvement fees, a park that never materialized, board members who vanished midterm, and a president who ruled like a feudal lord with a fake rulebook in one hand and foreclosure notices in the other. By the time she finished her story, I was shaking. Different HOA, same scam. Same blueprint. Same lies. The FBI confirmed it within a week. Pinewood Valley wasn't the heart of the operation. It was just one node in a web, 73 HOA letters, across 3 states. All using the same accounting software, all issuing suspicious fines, all with unusually high board turnover, shady vendors, and emergency assessments that never funded anything but shadows. And somehow, unbelievably, all roads led back to one source, a software licensing firm that had quietly issued HOA management solutions to dozens of communities, and whose name showed up in my grandmother's handwritten map. Integritizer Inc., a shell company, one of dozens Lynette had access to. The software wasn't just for bookkeeping. It was laundering money in plain sight, encrypted vendor payouts, fake contractor entries, a built-in delay system that shuffled fees through at least for accounts before final deposit. But my grandmother had known, years before the FBI did. She'd found the glitch in the matrix and started logging every transaction that didn't match up with what residents were told. Line by line, year by year, town by town. It was a spreadsheet so precise it scared forensic accountants. And it was the key to everything. News of the arrests rippled out like tremors from an epicenter. Local news gave way to national coverage. Articles hit the front pages. FBI busts HOA laundering ring. $17 million recovered. Dozens arrested. How one grandmother quietly sabotaged a criminal empire. The hidden tyrannies of American neighborhoods. Families from North Carolina to Utah started checking their HOA documents, searching for familiar names. And finding them. Within weeks, federal investigators had expanded the case. 13 more HOA letters came forward voluntarily, their boards suddenly interested in full transparency now that subpoenas were flying. But the thing that struck me most wasn't the scale. It was the stories. A retired teacher in Arizona who'd been fined $900 for having a non-compliant lawn statue, a ceramic all her late husband gave her. A single father in Georgia who lost his home after back-to-back emergency assessments strained his savings. A young couple in Nevada who delayed cancer treatments for their toddler to pay off violations tied to window blind colors. People had suffered. People had bled for rules that were never real, all enforced by fake authority to fund a real criminal network. But amidst the wreckage, something unexpected was blooming. Hope. The refunds started arriving 2 months later. Checks, wire transfers, statements with language like restitution payment, HOA fraud recovery. Some families used the money to pay medical debt. Some repaired roofs or fixed cars. Some just stared at it, tears running down their faces, whispering, "I thought we'd never see this again." It wasn't just money. It was dignity. Finally returned. And it wasn't just us. Other neighborhoods began forming grassroots coalitions. Residents who'd never spoken beyond a wave at the mailbox suddenly gathered on front lawns, coffee in hand, comparing stories. They started asking questions. Who was approving these fines? Where were the budgets? Why hadn't we had an election in 5 years? Across the country, people were waking up, not just to corruption, but to how easily it hides in plain sight when no one asks why. And they were learning something dangerous. That they were never powerless, just uninvited from the conversation. Until now. At Pinewood Valley, things moved fast. We held a public vote to abolish the old board structure, replaced it with rotating committees, open budget hearings, and publicly viewable ledgers posted on our new blockchain-secured HOA site. Every decision, from landscaping to trash pickup, was logged, time-stamped, and viewable by all residents. No more secret votes, no more closed-door decisions, no more emergency rules signed into existence by invisible hands. We turned the fake playground into a real one, the fake garden into a memory garden, dedicated to every resident who had suffered in silence. And my grandmother, we gave her a plaque. It didn't say much, just in honor of the woman who said no, because sometimes saying no to injustice, to fear, to power cloaked in protocol, is the most courageous thing a person can do. Donatella became my right hand. She taught me the finer points of budget balancing, HOA statutes, and how to spot the difference between sincere complaints and entitled whining. This isn't about control, she reminded me. It's about stewardship. The best kind of leadership is invisible. It just makes life easier for the people who live here. I couldn't count the number of times I looked across the garden and saw her smiling, waving at neighbors like she had all the time in the world, when in truth, she nearly lost it to a sabotage ladder. I asked her once why she never left, why she didn't sell her house and start over somewhere safe. She smiled and said, because then they win. And this place, it's mine too, Lynette. Her trial was short and brutal. Brad Vossler's testimony sealed her fate. He cried on the stand, recounted everything, the threats, the forgeries, the burner phones, the promises of protection. His voice broke when he described how she'd threatened his kids. She was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison plus restitution and forfeiture of all assets. The judge called her a predator wrapped in bureaucracy. You used forms, not fists. But the bruises you left were real. She didn't flinch as they read the verdict. But the look on her face, hollow, twitching, desperate to cling to authority that no longer existed, said everything. In the prison system, she became an icon of the worst kind, a woman trying to create an horror behind bars. Complaints to the warden. Cell inspections, drafted rules for acceptable bunk decorations. Her memos were leaked online. One TikTok skit, reenacting her threats to fine the guards for failing to water potted plants, went viral. Queen of airspace was no longer feared. She was a punchline. And my grandmother, I still hear her sometimes. In the garden, when the wind moves the chimes she hung 20 years ago. In the quiet moment before a vote, when I pause and ask myself what she would have done. She didn't leave behind a statue or a trust fund. She left a blueprint, a reminder that the world doesn't change through grand speeches or public battles. It changes when one person quietly, stubbornly, refuses to stay quiet, even when no one is watching. Especially then, and somehow, impossibly, she taught a community how to breathe again. Not through anger, through truth, through the quiet, relentless pursuit of what's right. 6 weeks after Lynette Coburn was sentenced, I sat in a folding chair on a makeshift stage in downtown Sacramento. The chair was cold. My palms were sweating. And across from me, under a banner that read Homeowners for Justice Reform, were hundreds of people, reporters, lawmakers, parents, veterans, grandmothers holding faded letters. All of them had the same look in their eyes, part pain, part disbelief, part fragile hope. I wasn't there as a hero. I was there as a witness, and as I stepped up to the podium, I realized something. This had never been just about me, or Pinewood Valley, or even Lynette. It was about all of them. Every homeowner who'd been silenced with legalese. Every parent who'd picked between groceries and fines. Every neighbor who stayed quiet because they couldn't afford to fight back. I took a breath and began. My grandmother once told me that the worst kind of thief doesn't break into your house, I said. They knock on your door with a clipboard and a smile, and convince you to hand over your life. Willingly, silence, then camera shutters. And as I told them everything, the helicopter, the fake violations, the safe in the basement, the map, the blockade, the gun, I saw something strange happening in the crowd. Heads nodding. Not in shock, but in recognition. Because they knew that feeling. They lived it. A woman approached me after the press conference. She looked about 60, wore a worn sweater and carried a plastic grocery bag like a purse. I didn't believe you at first, she said, thought it was another YouTube drama story. But then you mentioned the ladder bolts. The tampering, her voice dropped. My husband died falling off a ladder in 2015. I always thought it was just a fluke. She pulled out a photo, a cracked picture frame, a man in a veteran's cap, smiling in front of their front porch. Now, I'm not so sure. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only thing that felt true. I believe you. She squeezed my arm hard, then walked away without another word. That night, my inbox overflowed, not with hate mail or trolls, but with stories. One from Colorado. A deaf couple fined repeatedly for failure to respond to HOA notices that were never delivered in Braille. One from New Mexico. A teenage girl whose family had to sell their house after an illegal lien was placed over a missing trash bin. One from Florida. A man who'd spent for years trying to prove that his HOA president was falsifying board votes using forged e-signatures. He was right. They all were. Some had evidence, some just had trauma. But they all shared one thing. They'd been gaslighted by systems built to break them. And now, for the first time, someone was listening. I brought every story to Marcus. We met weekly now, usually in anonymous diners, always careful to sit facing exits. He listened without interrupting, took notes, sometimes swore under his breath. I've never seen anything like this, he admitted. HOA letters were supposed to protect neighborhoods. But this is racketeering in slow motion. He looked tired. Not just physically, morally, we busted Lynette, he said. But the architecture she used still exists in dozens of places, and most of it's legal, or at least legal enough to pass under the radar. That's when I realized something terrifying. We hadn't won. Not really, we just ripped the curtain. And now the hard part began, changing the system that allowed her to exist. Donatella, of course, saw it coming. She'd been watching this game longer than all of us. Corruption doesn't die, she told me as we water plants in the memory garden. It mutates, learns, finds new hosts. She pointed toward the row of new saplings along the old fence line. Justice is like gardening. You don't just dig up the weeds and walk away. You have to stay, watch, water. Pull out new ones before they spread. She handed me a shovel. Time to get your hands dirty. Within 2 months, our Pinewood Valley reforms have been downloaded and adapted by 14 other communities. We published our entire HOA constitution online for free. Voting transparency, blockchain auditing, rotating, leadership, community hearings, public budget breakdowns. No more fake emergency powers. No more shadow fines. People started calling it the Pinewood Charter. One Arizona neighborhood implemented it and saw a 72% drop in complaints within 3 months. Another in Oregon used it to catch a treasurer embezzling funds within a week. A community in Texas turned their HOA meetings into open town halls, even serving food. Their attendance tripled. Something was happening. Not fast, not loud. But real. The national media circled back. CBS did a segment on HOA overreach called Fines, Fear, and Fraud. The neighborhoods fighting back. They featured Donatella sitting on a bench in our park. She wore pearls and a sharp navy blazer. I'm not a hero, she said. I'm just old and tired of bullies. The clip went viral. So did another. One of me reading from my grandmother's handwritten ledger at a city council meeting, demanding legislative oversight for all HOA letters above a certain income threshold. We didn't get a law passed that day, but we got noticed. And that was enough. Then something unexpected arrived in the mail. A letter, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. My grandmother, young, probably mid-30s, sitting at a board table surrounded by men in suits. And a sticky note. She started it, now finish it. It shook me more than I expected because it meant someone out there had known her from the beginning, and they were still watching, still rooting for the fight. I tucked the photo into the side of the safe, not as evidence, as a reminder. Everywhere I went, I met people who whispered the same sentence. I thought I was the only one, and maybe that was the real crime, not just the theft, but the isolation. The manufactured silence that convinces people that suffering alone is normal. It's not. It never was. And the moment people realize that, the spell breaks. 3 months after Lynette's arrest, I stood beside Marcus at a federal hearing. We'd been called to give testimony before a House Oversight Subcommittee on HOA abuses. He went first. Calm, clinical, precise. Then it was my turn. They asked me what it felt like to inherit a house and walk into a war. To go from freelance coder to national whistleblower. I paused, then said, it felt like I was being slowly drowned by a smiling neighbor. There were chuckles, but I wasn't trying to be funny. I meant it, because the horror of Lynette's reign wasn't just in what she did. It was how normal it looked from the outside. Until you saw the rot underneath, until it was your yard, your window, your heart attack victim dying in the grass, while someone screamed about airspace violations. No one ever thinks tyranny looks like a clipboard and a laminated badge, until it does. After the hearing, one of the congresswomen pulled me aside. We're drafting legislation, she said. Federal guidelines for HOA transparency. It'll be an uphill battle. But you gave us a place to start. I didn't need a victory parade. I just needed that to start. That night, I walked the park trail. Children played under real lights. The air smelled like grass and grilled food. Neighbors smiled. Donatella sat on a bench with a clipboard, this time collecting ideas for next month's community art wall. And in the distance, I could hear someone playing a guitar by the garden. I passed by the bench we'd dedicated to my grandmother. Still simple, still quiet, but someone had added something, hand-painted stone tucked under the plaque. 3 words, we remember you. The threats didn't start with bullets. They started with whispers. It began in a quiet HOA meeting in a small Florida town. A motion filed to review the potential for defamation litigation against false online accusations. The target, me. Then came the blogs. Anonymous articles written under names like Ho Truth and Neighborhood Watched. They painted me as a radical, a liar, a disgruntled man-child exploiting his grandmother's death for online clout. One post even suggested I'd planted evidence to frame Lynette, that I'd falsified financial records to become famous. I laughed at first. Then one of the posts showed up quoted in a local news article, and that's when I realized this wasn't petty, this was tactical. Within days, a chain of coordinated lawsuits began appearing in states I hadn't even visited. HOA boards from Georgia to Arizona filed cease and desist letters claiming defamation, interference, and even cyberstalking. One suit accused me of hacking an HOAS servers. Another claimed I was intentionally spreading panic and unrest among tax-paying residents. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to bury me in paper. Marcus warned me immediately. This isn't just legal bullying, he said. It's a coordinated counterattack. These boards are connected. They know if this movement spreads, their time is up. He wasn't wrong. The Pinewood Charter was now active in 41 communities. Our transparency systems were being adopted faster than anyone expected. And the old guard was panicking. Because the second people realized how easy it was to ask questions, the entire power structure began to collapse. Donatella, as always, cut to the heart of it. They're not afraid of you, she said. Sipping tea on my porch. They're afraid of truth without a middleman. She gestured toward the garden, where volunteers were building a new shed with reclaimed wood and donated supplies. Power only survives if people believe they need permission to challenge it. The next wave hit harder. My personal address was leaked. So was my phone number. Within hours, I was getting voicemails like, "You ruined this neighborhood with your fake park. You're a communist. Go back to wherever you came from. You want justice." Wait till you see how the system really handles triggers. One message just repeated the phrase, "You're not safe," over and over. I sent everything to Marcus. He had a team sweep my house the next morning. They found a hidden camera planted in my backyard planter box, disguised as a garden ornament. Someone had been watching me, recording, possibly live, streaming. The footage never surfaced. But knowing they had it was enough. I barely slept for a week. I started keeping the lights on all night. I watched every car that drove by too slowly, took alternate routes home, backed into my driveway so I could leave faster if I needed to. It felt like being hunted all over again. Then came the real blow. A coordinated smear campaign hit national talk radio and cable news. The headlines were, "Brutal, how a conspiracy theorist faces legal trouble in multiple states. Self-proclaimed whistleblower accused of harassment. Is this man destroying America's neighborhoods?" They twisted the story, made me look unstable, dangerous. One commentator said I was weaponizing grief for political gain. Another laughed and said I was just a wannabe Snowden with a leaf blower. And still, the movement grew. Why? Because truth spreads faster than spin when people are already angry. The comments under those articles, they weren't what the old guard hoped for. They were filled with stories, with receipts, with screenshots of fees, fines, and broken promises. People weren't just believing me. They were remembering themselves. And memory is a powerful weapon. Still, the stress was brutal. I lost weight. Stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night. Even Donatella noticed. "You look like a ghost," she said. "You need to breathe." I wanted to believe her. But that night, I came home to find my front door unlocked. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Just unlocked. I stood in the entryway for almost a minute. Then walked to the basement. The safe was untouched, but on the desk, someone had left a single sticky note. "Back off, Wyatt. We don't need another martyr." It was signed 44,792. Lynette's inmate number was 44,791. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone inside the system was watching me. And they knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus showed up the next morning with a federal escort. "You're not going anywhere alone," he said. They installed a panic button in my kitchen. "Cameras, door sensors. This is bigger than HOA fraud now," he said. "It's organized intimidation and possibly insider retaliation from corrupted agency contacts." I stared at him. "You're saying the same people who are supposed to be protecting us might be in on it." His silence was answer enough. We were deep in the machine now, and the machine was trying to shake us off like a virus. But then, something changed. The families fought back, one by one. People began posting video testimonies, homeowners across the country telling their stories. Some were heartbreaking, some enraging, some just bizarre. A father standing in front of a weed-covered lot where a community center was supposed to be built. A war widow fined for leaving a memorial flag up one day too long. A teenager reading horror letters to her blind grandmother. Thousands of views. Then tens of thousands. Then millions. And finally, something new. Politicians started listening. A senator in Illinois proposed the Community Oversight and Protection Act, federal protections for homeowners, including audit requirements for HOA letters that collected over $500,000 annually. Another representative in Oregon introduced a bill that would criminalize fraudulent fines above $1,000. And suddenly, I was being invited again. To hearings, panels, roundtables. I wasn't a villain anymore. I was a witness again. Because no matter how loud the lies got, the truth, backed by files, photos, blocking timestamps, never blinked. But the cost was still high. One night, I found Donatella crying softly on the community center steps. She never cried. "It's just so much," she whispered. "So many people hurt. So many years wasted. And for what?" "For power," I said. "But not anymore." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and looked up at the sky. "She'd be proud of you." You know, I didn't answer, because I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. Like my grandmother must have felt after 14 years fighting this alone. But I also understood her better than I ever had. She didn't fight because she thought she'd win. She fought because someone had to. And sometimes, that's the only reason that matters. Later that week, I received one more letter. No return address. Inside, another photo. This time, it was me. Standing at my grandmother's funeral. Around Donatella, on the back. Scrawled in the same handwriting as before. Don't stop now, you're almost there. It ended where it began. In my grandmother's garden. A breeze moved through the lavender bushes she planted 20 years ago. The chimes above the porch rang softly, just like they used to on the nights we sat together in silence. Only this time, she wasn't sitting beside me, but I could feel her just the same. The scent of her soap still lingered in the air, and the truth she planted had taken root. Lynette Coburn, inmate number 44,791, had finally broken. Not publicly, not in front of cameras or courtroom benches, but in a quiet, sealed deposition with federal prosecutors. The final crack came when she learned what my grandmother had done, that the money wasn't just recovered, it had already been returned, that the playground she once fabricated to launder cartel money had become a real playground built by neighbors she thought too weak to rise, that her empire had collapsed not because of a grand expose, but because an old woman with a desktop computer and a moral compass wouldn't back down. Lynette's final words in that deposition were short. I underestimated her. She always had. They all had. When Marcus showed me the final case file, he looked exhausted, but satisfied. 73 communities, he said, 23 federal convictions, 42 resignations, $17 million recovered. He placed a final folder on the table. Inside, a sealed recommendation, a proposal for the Department of Housing and Urban Development to begin drafting federal oversight policy on HOA financial transparency, directly inspired by the Pinewood Valley investigation. It wasn't a law yet, but it was a beginning. And beginnings are where revolutions start. That week, Pinewood Valley held a memorial. Not for Lynette. Not for the collapse of the old board, but for everyone who'd suffered in silence for years, fined, surveilled, threatened, forgotten. We called it the Garden of Quiet Names. Stones were laid along the park path, not engraved with names, but with simple one-word traits: teacher, caregiver, veteran, father, widow, fighter, friend. Donatella read a short statement, then nodded to me. I stepped forward. Held the final stone, set it in place near the roots of the oldest tree, grandmother, and that was when I saw them, dozens of people I'd never met before, standing in the crowd, some with tears, some holding hands, all silent. Many had flown in from other states, former victims, activists, journalists, ordinary homeowners who had once believed they were alone. Now they weren't. Now they were a community. The next morning, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a small wooden box and a note. Found this in an archive safe deposit drawer under her name. Bank records said it hadn't been accessed in 12 years. Figured it belonged to you. Inside the box were 3 things: a photograph of my grandmother and Donatella, young and fearless, holding protest signs in front of a courthouse I didn't recognize, a USB drive, and a handwritten envelope with my name on it. The letter inside was short: Wyatt, if you're reading this, you found the last piece. The USB has something I couldn't risk storing anywhere else. It's the original map. The real map. The one that shows where the system still hides. Don't show it to everyone. Just to the ones who are brave enough to listen. I never expected to fix it all. I just hoped someone would still care when it mattered. You do. Love never dies, Grandma. I opened the USB that night. It was encrypted, of course, but the password was obvious. Lavender 2010. Inside was a spreadsheet: dates, names, addresses, and something new: internal HOA board chat logs from a platform I didn't recognize. It wasn't just Pinewood Valley that had been infiltrated. There were others, still operating, still faking votes, still laundering small sums into massive revenue. Some were cautious, some weren't. But they all shared one thing. They assumed no one would notice, that no one would keep watching once the headlines faded. They were wrong, because I'm still here, and so are the people who care. Donatella and I sat on the new community center deck that weekend. Neighbors were gathered all around, painting fences, trimming shrubs, stringing up lanterns for that night's community dinner. She looked out across the park, at the benches built from repurposed corruption, the swings funded by return restitution, the sandbox filled by volunteers. Think they'll remember this place? She asked. I looked at the memory garden, at the quiet stones, at the new sign beside the playground that read, built by those who believed. They won't forget. I said, not this time. And they didn't. The story of Pinewood Valley became a case study taught in legal ethics classes. A YouTube documentary narrated by Marcus went viral, over 12 million views in the first month. It was titled, The Garden That Grew from Lies. Social media picked it up, comment sections flooded with horror stories, but also with something new: solutions, templates, reform guides, hope. Even the memes took a turn. Lynette's infamous meltdown in the parking lot became a GIF captioned, when you realize you're not the president of anything anymore. But my favorite was simpler, just a photo of my grandmother at her desk, captioned, you don't need a title to make change. You just need receipts. It's been 1 year since the trial. I still live in the same house, still walk the same creaky floors, still hear her voice in the quiet moments when the wind catches the chimes just right. I run the HOA now, not as a president, but as a facilitator. We vote. We argue. We mess up and fix things together. It's not perfect. It's honest. And honesty, I've learned, is what makes people brave. Because truth doesn't spread like fire. It spreads like roots. Quiet. Patient. Unstoppable. Once it finds good soil. The final numbers were published this spring. $17 million returned, 23 convictions, 73 communities reformed, 1 country waking up in somewhere in a federal cell. Lynette Coburn is reportedly petitioning for better floor tile standards. She's filed 18 grievances so far. Her fellow inmates call her president, but they don't mean it kindly. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it all over again. The fear, the threats, the lawsuits, the sleepless nights. The answer is always the same. Yes. Because even the smallest light becomes a lighthouse when everyone else is standing in the dark. And because justice, real justice, doesn't always arrive in sirens or verdicts. Sometimes it comes quietly through a garden gate in the wind. Carried by a woman no one ever expected to matter, but who changed everything anyway.